Hey everyone, I'm Nick Worker, host of Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I am happy to report we've made it to the end of 2020 and the holiday season is finally upon us. I sincerely hope that everyone in the legal community enjoys a much needed mental break over these next few weeks and is able to create some wonderful holiday memories. Now with 2020 wrapping up, we wanted to take a look back at some of the best moments from our Everything Except the Law podcast this year. We've assembled some clips and some of our favorite conversations with guests on the show, in which a wide variety of law office management topics are discussed. We really hope this inspires you to check out the podcast further. We'll see you with new episodes in 2021. This is something that I think is super interesting about your company, Reputation Inc. Because obviously, before we jumped on this call, I wanted to do a bunch of research on Reputation Inc. And one of the things that you guys preach is that attorney bios on their website are so much more important than people think. I would love for you to elaborate on that.
Well, I mean, all the data shows that attorney bios are the top visited web pages, or top pages within a law firm site. So if you look at the traffic law firm sites are getting, it's to those attorney bio pages. And it makes sense if you think about the fact that an attorney is the product that a law firm is selling. So when clients buy a law firm, they are really looking at a particular lawyer often. Some firms have such strong brands that they are buying a law firm brand. But for smaller firms, especially, they're buying the actual attorney. So that's why those bios are the most trafficked pages. And it's really important that the lawyers take some time to really think through how they're presenting themselves on those pages. It really is their own website and plays an important role in whether a client actually brings that law firm on. So we do a lot of, one, just writing the narrative for lawyers, but also working with them to think about going and getting client testimonials that they can add to their bios. Thinking through, can we cross-link a lot of the thought leadership that the lawyer's done onto their bio? So kind of helping strategically think about the kind of content they need to get on that page, whether they want to write it in first person or third person, all those kinds of questions. But they're just a heavily trafficked page that clients are paying attention to.
That's so interesting that you say that, because number one, I've never thought of an attorney as the sort of tangible product that they're selling. I always think of it as, I got a traffic ticket. Can you make my traffic ticket go away? But, you're really hiring a person at the end of the day. And you're so right about that. I do have a question. Especially
for business lawyers, because it's an ongoing relationship. It's not a one-off problem that they're having. So that's why clients are looking really closely. Is this the advisor I want day in, day out, working with me in my business? So that's where it really comes into play.
And I think one of the things that you talk about that is sort of one of those things that holds a lot of people back is sure, I'm going to create the video. I can cut it, I can edit it, I have a process. I'm not worried about that. Once I have this video, what do I do with it? I can post it to YouTube, but how do I, and that to me, that's like one of the roadblocks that holds people back is how am I going to get this thing seen? So in your expertise, right, how do you go about, and especially in the beginning, right, when you first started out, how would you go about trying to get your videos seen?
So the way that I do it and the way I teach it is to really, really get clear on what niche you're serving. And you need to format your video in that way. So the example that I give when I'm talking to people is I say, many people, let's say you're in the market for shopping for a new car, right? And you say, I want a sports car. So you go into Google and you type, I want a sports car. Okay, you're going to get, a gazillion different options, right? Buy a sports car. Okay, you're going to get all of them. Pick a model. Well, that's not really that focused, right? It's too general. So if you're trying to compete for sports car, you're not going to do well. If you make a video and you review a sports car, there's going to be just a million videos that you're competing with. But if you make a video about, a Lexus, one specific model that has this feature on it and also has a sunroof and also is available on a lease, and you also want that in Scottsdale, Arizona. You see how specific that is. So if you're making a video about that one particular model, you're not going to get as many views as you would get from somebody looking for a sports car. But the person who's looking for that Lexus in Scottsdale with a sunroof, with the, you know, whatever other amenities they're looking for, when they type that into Google, the only video that's going to pop up is yours, because you're the only one who made something that specific. And so if you make videos that are that clear, so for a DUI example, right? If I'm representing if I'm making videos on DUIs and I say DUI defense, well, that could be applicable to anybody, anywhere in the United States, in any state. And I'm not licensed to practice in every state. I'm only licensed in Arizona and California. So if I make a video about DUI defense on a first offense, super extreme DUI with no prior convictions in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I put that in my description and I make it very clear, I use that language. I use that in my description on YouTube. I used hashtags that say Scottsdale, that say first offense DUI, that say, you know, Lexus sports car with a sunroof, whatever that is for your practice area. That's how it's going to get found, because you're looking for the people that are searching for those very, you know, very, very specific keywords. And so Google will take that video and they'll put it on the front page of Google. People on YouTube will find it. You know, you'll be recommended when somebody's watching somebody else's videos that's related to that. And so that's how you get found. And when you do that, so at volume, you know, one of the things you have to do in all of your videos is provide value. So you have to actually answer the question that people are searching for. You can't do the 90-second stuff. But if you do that at volume, meaning you're doing, like I said, 20 videos a month, or where we're at now, you know, 100 pieces of content a month, the net is just so wide. So you're capturing a lot of those little people in a lot of the lower views, but the highly targeted searches, those are going to convert into views on your channel. And that's where you really see the ROI. Those people will convert into clients because you're helping them. They build a relationship with you because you're giving them information. You're not asking them to call and schedule a free case evaluation or a free consultation, or, you know, don't pay unless we win, or any of that stuff. You're saying, here's what you need. Here's how I would address this problem if I were in your shoes. Those people get an emotional connection because you're helping them without asking for anything. They pick up the phone and they call. So rather than encouraging people to be worried about subscribers, I see a lot of attorneys, I need to get 100 subscribers or 1,000 subscribers or whatever that is. That's good, you know, if you're in a practice area where you're going to have repeat business. You know, if you're a lawyer who does business law and you're always, analyzing contracts or doing something like that, that makes more sense to go after those people. But for me, our clients, hopefully this is the only time they've ever been charged with a crime. For somebody getting a divorce, hopefully that's the last time they get divorced, right? And they're not going to need your services again. So when you make content for that, that's really where you start to see the value. And I just encourage people to keep that in mind, because it's very easy to get distracted by those vanity metrics.
There's no real beginner's guide to SEO. Like as much as you can create a beginner's guide to SEO, there needs to be like a what do you call that on a map? A key? There needs to be a key.
Yeah, I feel like there is a pretty decently paved roadmap that if you want to spend $10,000 plus a month on SEO, it's pretty clear what you should be doing. But what you just mentioned actually is near and dear to my heart, because it goes back to the world of law. Somebody breaks out of a firm, they hang a shingle, go out on their own. There's no, we get those calls, what should they do? And I'll tell you what we tell them. And this is, and this has really become more and more of a necessity as time has marched on in the last 5 years. But you have to start with local SEO. You start with just like Subway sandwiches, 5-mile radius of marketing, same thing. Figure out who you are practice area wise, figure out what your approach is as an attorney. Consult with someone like us and get just a basic marketing plan, which, oh, by the way, if you called us, we would give it to you. We'll just talk to you about that. And then do good local SEO, which really simply put is building local listing citations. If you start there and you set a goal, I'm going to build 250 citations around your address and name and phone number, and all of them are equal and the same, and you've got a website, you're going to get something out of it. That's a pretty good starting point. And from there, it depends upon how much money you have. Obviously we would recommend, hey, if you've got a couple of $100s a month to spend, go buy a paid link or a listing at lawyers.com or FindLaw. Stay away from Avo. Sorry, Avo. Or just Dia. So Avo, you got de-indexed. You guys got to figure that out.
I want to talk about how important data and numbers are to your firm and specifically like how you implemented this Jumbotron, what you do with it, and how it's applicable to, you know, smaller law firms who want to make better decisions.
So that's chapter 3 in our book. It's the longest chapter. John wrote most of it. It's probably the gem, one of the gems in the book. I had a call today from a lawyer in Atlanta who didn't know their numbers, wanted to hire John to do his little Jumbotron for him. That's actually turning into a thing. John's in Ohio right now working with a firm since the book started, doing some professional coaching. Wasn't planned, Nick. It wasn't part of the vision, but it's happening. Yeah. And it's gratifying. But, you know, people don't know their numbers. And I asked the same questions. I said, well, okay, what's your most profitable type of case? I don't know. Well, what's your average fee? I don't know. What's your average turnaround for a case? I don't know. How many cases have you signed up this week? I don't know. How about last week? I don't know. All right, how about in 2020? I don't know. How about 2019? I don't know. Now I could take this on, and you get my point.
Mm-hmm.
And that was me when my father-in-law started sitting me down in the mid-2000s, early 2000s, and asked me about my business. I didn't have any idea. All I knew is that I had money in the bank. I was able to pay bills, and that's really it. You know, my secretary said, we need a new copier. Do we have enough money in the bank for a new copier? Yeah. All right, buy one. There was no thought. Now, no matter what the question, we run the data to see if it's a smart move, whether it's going into a new area, whether it's going into a new city, whether it's expanding practice, whether it's hiring people, whether it's how much should we pay, what are our projections for 2020? How much money are we going to make in 2020? And divide that by 52 weeks and let me know every week if I'm on track or am I off track. If I'm off track more than 2 or 3 weeks in a row, I do something. If I'm on track, I can check that box and move on to the next issue. Because every week we all have issues. And we're big at following up and we're big at accountability and we're big at solving our issues. And without the numbers, I have no idea how you do that. So my scorecard has grown from 1 piece of paper to probably 10. I look at it once a week on Tuesday mornings at 8:30, 90 minutes, same day, same time, never late. And if I'm out of town, I do it. And if I can't be there, my team does it without me. My executive team is now 8 people. And that's where I know if things are going well or not going well. That's when, if I'm sitting on a desert island with a plane and a butler and a chef, do I have to shoot back to Detroit, or can I stay for another week? The Jumbotron is supposed to tell you how you're doing in the game of practicing law. Just like a football player looking up the scoreboard to see how many seconds are left, how many timeouts are left, what's the score, all right? That's what it is for lawyers.
I went to a few different colleges, universities, but I ended up one of my last stints was at Stony Brook University, and I had this professor who taught, it was like advanced statistics, but it wasn't business statistics. It was like, I don't know, some crazy, I'm not a math guy, but I had to take it, right? And one of the things that he did really well was he was like a really good motivator, talker, helped really people figure out what they wanted to do. And I don't remember why. He was just a statistics professor, and I wish I could thank this guy, because I still think about this. What he said to the class was, you know, you're gonna go out into the world and you're gonna see a lot of people start their own businesses and find success. And a lot of these people who aren't self-aware are gonna find success on accident, and that's gonna self-validate them, right? And self-validate their choices, and so they think that they can do it again. And they think they can do it again. And he in essence taught us that, like, success isn't a validator of the choices that you made, and being self-aware, like you're talking about, and knowing your strengths and weaknesses is something that you can sort of play to and replicate, right? So like, it might not be sustainable for you to, I'll give my interpretation of it is that you can go to a marketing conference, and I'm talking to you right now. You seem like a great talker, and you can rub elbows with somebody and get a lot of, you know, contacts and leads and experience short-term success just from going to one marketing conference, but it drains you, and that's not what you're good at, and that's not what you're comfortable doing. And so if you try to replicate that a bunch of times, you'll either experience the burnout that we're talking about, or, you know, it won't work so well, maybe the third or the fourth or the fifth time. And then where are you? You know, like, this is all you know, this is what you've invested in, and then you experience failure. So what I'm hearing is self-awareness and knowing what you're good at, knowing what you love to do is ultimately more important than like finding this short-term success, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's so much wisdom in what he taught and then what you obviously took away from it. And then one of the things that I write about and that's important too, and I think it draws into what you're saying here, is that we have to focus on the processes that either bring us to our success or failure rather than focusing on the outcome. And I'll give you a really specific example of that. Because I use a lot of sports examples in that part of the book, because, you know, you have this 76ers and you have Bill Belichick and you have Nick Saban, and all these guys talk about process. And so in my own trial experience, we had a case early in February of this year that tried, and it was a case that we probably shouldn't have won. My client rear-ended some folks, and like the big question in the case was whether or not the people were hurt or not. They were claiming to be hurt, but were they or weren't they? Because there was no dispute that like she ran into the back of their car. And so we try the case and we win, and we weren't expecting to win. And so, you know, you talk to people about it the next few days and everybody wants to know how it went. And, you know, there's part of you that like really wants to accept this praise, like, look at this great job we did. But there's another part of me that knows that, you know, a different jury on a different day gets a different result, and it wouldn't have been anything that I did. And so I couldn't really look at that positive outcome as a determiner, because it could just as easily have been a negative outcome. What I had to go back and look at and analyze was, okay, what did I do along the way? Did we do all of the right things to put ourselves in this position that ultimately led to a successful outcome? And even if it had been a negative outcome, did we still do the right things? And we just put it in the hands of 12 people and they get to decide. And so for me, I enjoyed the positive outcome. I enjoyed winning that, but it's more important to go back and look and say, okay, what did we do that got us here? Should we do those same things next time? What should we do differently or better? And so as much as you can in those few moments enjoy the result, you still have to go back and look at what got me here. And so whether it's marketing, whether it's, you know, the business aspect of your practice, if you had a, you know, really profitable year, was it happenstance or was it things that you actually did intentionally to achieve those things? And are they replicable? What should you do better or different to maximize that? So focusing on those processes, to me, is more important than the outcome.
What should law firms, small law firms, solo and decent sized firms, what should they be using as far as technology? Not only for like their practice management, but for sort of like client intake. And also I do want to kind of cover this because you mentioned checks, like paper checks.
Right. Right.
So like
that's
like
still a thing
too. Yeah. Listen, I still have paper checks somewhere. I
have paper checks as well. When do I use them? 2006. Yeah, it's really funny because when analog, I think is the right word, because when you look at most law firms, most small law firms, they're kind of like Walkman, right? Now you got to like ramp up from that to something else. The thing is, what you want to do is take a look at all your processes. And if it involves like an in-person transaction of some kind, figure out what the equivalent is to a digital transaction. And that could cover a number of different things, right? So you talked about like managing the practice. So case management software is very popular for lawyers, productivity software as well. And what those things do for you is they don't necessarily replace processes, but they guide processes. And they also free you up in terms of time spent, right? So if you're using like a Clio or a MyCase or a Rocket Matter or one of the case management softwares in conjunction with like Outlook for email, and calendar, or Google for email and calendar, as well as like an accounting software like QuickBooks or Xero. You can apply workflows to your systems so that everybody knows how to approach a case in the same way. There's consistency for the people who work for you. There's consistency with what you do. There's consistency for the client. You're reducing malpractice. You're operating at a faster clip. And then because you have all these systems in place that you can look at data on at any given point, well, now you've got the ability to have fewer meetings because you can know the status of a case just by clicking on it. Man, when I worked at law firms, we would have, and this is one of the reasons I stopped working at law firms, Saturday morning, we would go in and have like a case brief. And literally we would bring the boxes into the conference room and look at like every single case we had. And I said to myself, this is awful. Like, why do I want to spend my weekends like this? There's got to be a better way to do this. And clearly there was. The other thing that you talked about, like payments, right? What does intake look like now? And this was already changing pre-pandemic, but what are the digital processes you can leverage there? So we're on a Zoom call right now. You don't have to have client meetings anymore. You don't have to have initial intake meetings in person any longer. You can use Zoom or any number of other products. You got Microsoft Teams, you got Wire, you've got Signal. There are untold numbers of video conferencing tools you can use. And then the same thing for paper signatures, right? You don't need to do that anymore either. And people act like this is a new thing, but the e-sign act was passed by the federal government 20 years ago, which basically said that wet signatures were just the same as digital signatures. And it's taken attorneys a long time to adopt that. So HelloSign, Adobe Sign, DocuSign, those are all e-signature platforms that people could use like tomorrow. Super easy to use. Electronic payments for law firms, right? Like, you don't want somebody like going to get you a check, because that's like an 18-step process. It takes a long time, and they have to have the money in their account. And then now you're getting smaller retainers. You have to collect more regularly. So let them pay by credit cards. You pay a processing fee, but you get paid more, and you get paid quicker. And then you eliminate I got to go to the bank. I got to get a cashier's check. I got to bring it back home. I got to put an envelope. I got to put a stamp on it. I got to mail it to the lawyer's office. Not even to mention what happens when it gets to the lawyer's office and how many steps you take after that. So that's the process I talk to law firms about going through all the time. Like, look at every aspect of your of what you do in a given day, figure out what the tasks are, and then automate as many of them as you can.
So you were talking about how clients want to collaborate more with their attorneys a lot more these days. So what are some of the things that lawyers can do to make their clients feel like they're being included on the legal process?
So I guess I would say I would turn that around. What can lawyers do so that they're more included in the business process, right? In the product cycle, in the agile sprints that business is making? How can lawyers be at the table earlier? So what happens is that sometimes clients don't want to ask the lawyers right away because they kind of are suspecting that the lawyers are going to, want to analyze it from every which way and come back and be maybe, stop signs as opposed to enablers. And so what happens is they don't get pulled in early enough. And then by the time they are pulled in, they're playing catch up, and they can't get an answer really quickly because they haven't been involved the whole time. And then they do seem like they're taking too long, and then that they're stop signs. So I think the key is that lawyers need to figure out how to enable business and how to be involved earlier and how to sit with business and work with business from the beginnings of projects. And then if they do that, the business will more naturally be involved in the lawyer's thought process and thinking. Because the other way around, which is how we kind of started with the question, the lawyer will go off and they will analyze everything from every different direction. So by the time they get back to the client with the answer, they're feeling very solid in whatever advice they're going to give. Yet I think the clients would appreciate understanding that thought process, the why, right? So all the great companies start with why. Why are you doing with what you're doing? And if lawyers are not part of the process, they don't know why business is doing stuff. And then business doesn't know why lawyers have come to that conclusion. So I'm a big believer in that need for lawyers, outside lawyers, to be working with their clients, the in-house clients, more collaboratively, and for in-house to be working with their internal business clients more collaboratively. And it's not like the regular collaboration of yesterday. It's proactive collaboration. And Carlos Valdez de Pena has this book called Lessons from Mars. And it's not a law book. And he actually puts it together this scale of like dissonance all the way up to what you might call proactive co-collaboration. And in his book, he says most people, what we're doing is we're cooperating or in parallel play, like little kids, but that we're not really collaborating. And if we are, it's reactive because we've been asked to, as opposed to proactive. And so that's my calling right now is I'm calling out to all lawyers to try to be more proactive. Insert yourself, make it happen.
I want to ask you, because we're talking about timeliness, right? And obviously, running your own business, running your own firm, you have to make money. If you're not bringing in money every month, you're not going to be able to stay open. And so a lot of the problems that people run into is that clients really aren't paying them on time or when they expect to be paid. So, and I know you probably have some numbers on this. So how much does giving clients the ability to pay by credit card increase the odds of them paying on time?
Yeah, Clio actually has some super, super cool data on that. I think they said that this is from, I don't think they've updated the numbers since, but I think in 2016, their legal trend report said, hey, clients who pay online or who are offered that option pay 39% faster. 39%. And then it's kind of an astounding number. I think from the 2019 report, they said 57% of online payments are paid the same day that invoice is sent out. So if I send out an invoice that says, client, you owe me $5,000, here's the link to pay. 57% of the time they're paying within the same day. 85% of the time they're paying within the same week, which is kind of wild.
I can almost guarantee you that what you just said is the intro to this podcast.
It's like there's just a bunch of fun data with that, but I mean, it's absolutely, if you think about it, it's kind of a no-brainer. If a client is sent an invoice and doesn't have the ability to pay by credit card, okay, well then they're paying by check, which they're having to fish out their checkbook and mail it to you, or they're paying by wire transfer, which is difficult. A lot of clients don't know how to do that, and we really only did it when it came to super huge amounts, right? When it came to our high asset family law firm. And then or they're doing a money order, or they're dropping cash by your office. So again, the clients would have to take extra steps in order to get that payment to you, rather than just plugging in a credit card number that chances are they already have saved to their Apple Pay or their computer or something like that, where they can just do it, plug it in, and have it be done that same day, and they don't have to worry about it. Otherwise, you're having to worry about tracking down that payment in the first place, making sure the check clears, finally 4 days after you received it. So it's pushing all of your receivables back. So all of a sudden, you're 2 months into it and they still haven't paid their first invoice, and so it just, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer to increase firm efficiency to take a credit card.
I feel like I keep going back to the Clio legal trends report, but I was just reading it for so long. It's a pretty big report. And I want to
this year especially.
Yeah. And so I have it like bookmarked on my computer because I go through sections of it. But from your perspective, and I think this will be really interesting because you're you, what was the most surprising thing that you learned in gathering results for this year's report?
Yeah. Man, as you commented on, this year's legal trends report was a monster. And I think maybe one of the most surprising results for me was a bit of a shift in terms of the past reports we've published. We've often talked about the fact that there's this chasm between consumer expectations and how lawyers were delivering legal services. And this year's report, for the first time ever, really, I think highlighted the fact that we're actually seeing a shift that is helping drive lawyers and consumers closer together rather than further apart. And that's kind of a macro level take on the report. But one of the overall messages that the constellations of data in the report tell us is that, you know, COVID-19 has pushed consumers to a more online world. They're consuming, buying goods and services primarily online, and their desire for consuming services from legal providers that offer their services online has gone through the roof. And then when we look at the data from the lawyer's side, when I look at this data, one of the ways I frame this is thinking about the legal trends report data for lawyers' adoption of technology. To me, it looks like it's a report from the distant future. Like, you know, if you handed me the data that we were looking at in this year's legal trends report back in January of this year, I would have told you that you know, this data must be from the year 2030 or so. Like, I really believe we've seen a decade or more of transformation and technology adoption in lawyers and law firms. And you just look at the data where you look at the adoption rate of cloud solutions. You look at the adoption rate of Zoom and video conferencing tools. You look at the amount of facility that we see lawyers demonstrating when it comes to all of these online technologies, electronic payments, Zoom calls, you name it. It's really a punctuated difference from what we saw in February or January of this year. So this I think has really helped push, you know, through an external force, and back to our original kind of conversation around the kind of like evolutionary biology take on this, the macro environment that COVID-19 has imposed on both consumers and lawyers has really done a lot to push them closer together than they were pre-pandemic. It's equipped consumers with the tools and technologies and mindsets where they're more comfortable working with lawyers online. And we've seen law firms adapt to operating online. And again, you know, those are going to be, it's not every law firm, but those are going to be the law firms. And again, the message, the signal that comes through very strongly in the data from this year's legal trends report is the law firms that are making that shift and embracing those cloud-based tools and embracing those client-centered tools are winning in a really definitive way. And those dividends are going to continue to pay off over the next decade, because this is a permanent shift in consumer expectations and a permanent shift in terms of how they want to access legal services. So for me, that's the number one takeaway from this year's legal trends report. And the most surprising result, the fact that we are, you know, for the first time in 5 years of doing this report, really starting to see an opportunity for consumers and lawyers to be a better fit going forward, thanks to some of the macro level changes that COVID-19 has driven.
I think it's staggering, especially in the legal community, how normal it is to work like 80 plus hours a week. And I have friends who became lawyers and they love it and they make a lot of money, and I'm not faulting them for that. I don't fault anybody for wanting to better themselves, make a good living, and work hard. But I definitely understand the need to sort of combat the burnout, which I feel like is what you guys do. And because the legal community has such a stigma around it, where you need to be working harder, you need to put in more hours, you need to wake up at 5 and go to bed at 2 a.m. And just outwork the competition. So I know those are some of the bigger misconceptions, but what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people often have about occupational burnout? It's obviously, especially in the legal community, but in general as well.
I think the biggest one that I see is just this misconception about how how dire the problem really is, and that if you just take like a couple days off, like a long weekend or something, that you're going to be better. And it just doesn't work like that. It's, you know, the process of getting burnt out is kind of a slow creep, like it happens over time. And so, you know, it's also going to be a process over time to get out of that and get back to kind of this like equilibrium. Like, Cynthia, do you have anything else on that?
Yeah, and you know, one of the points you made, Nick, about attorneys working so hard, it's as if it's a badge of honor. Like I know I started out in big law, and that was in 1982. I started in big law in Philadelphia, and it was, if you weren't there on the weekends, there was big trouble. I mean, everybody went in on the weekends. And so it's that badge of honor. And so what this type of culture then, it ingrains secrecy in you because you don't want to show your vulnerability. So that's one of the misconceptions about burnout, is that don't tell anybody, and that you're better off not seeking help. That, oh, if you're burnt out, that's a sign of weakness, a sign of vulnerability. Keep that stiff upper lip. But I argue to the contrary, that people who actually do seek help, that do deny that really insidious misconception that they're the ones that are going to be the strong ones. And here's another misconception, is that it's only me. And I think that if you would think about other attorneys that you think are so aggressive, so strong, just so solid, that you may remember the old adage, don't judge a book by its cover. And because that cool exterior may just be covering up a real hot mess. And you know, the main cause, here's what a lot of people think about burnout, is that the main cause of burnout is working too many hours. It's a factor, those 60, 80-hour consistent weeks, it is a factor, but there's other factors that come into play. And think about if this sounds familiar to you. Unmanageable workload. Have you ever been there? And that's that combination of really long hours and too many tasks. And so the studies show that occupationally, that burnout increases at 50 hours a week. Then it really goes up at 60 hours a week. But the factors that are the real defining causes is lack of engagement in your work. So that means it just isn't important to you any longer. And then also not feeling like you're being respected. The pressures and the deadlines that are put on attorneys externally are bad enough. But I think sometimes some attorneys can be a cause of some of their own problems, and that's through procrastination. Because if you think about procrastination, you know, putting off until tomorrow what you should do today, and I here's what I've heard so many who procrastinate. Oh, I am a former procrastinator, by the way, so I can talk about this. Is that I do my best work at the last minute. And my question to those people, how would you know? You know, when is the last time you didn't do your work at the last minute? So there's some of that self-sabotaging behavior.
And procrastination really is just emotional avoidance. It's like you have this thing, and like it's affiliated with this negative emotion because it's like, oh, for whatever reason, you know, you're resisting doing it, right? And so meditation what are we doing in meditation is like increasing the space between the thought and then the action, or really reaction, because we're in such a reactive state these days, it seems. But it really does give you that pause, so then you can, you know, you can have that distance to be like, oh, and recognize like, oh, why did I suddenly just like pivot to, oh, I need to clean my entire house instead of work on this memo that's due at 3 o'clock, right? Like, and then you can be like, huh, okay. And then you can actually like then make a decision from this informed place of being able to see like what's really going on in that moment.